built a career and you have now come to this point where you are a creative director. So I wanted to first really get you to dive into what specifically is a creative director.
These days, with fashion being a huge industry, the fact is creative directors exist within design when it comes to designing, I think within a fashion house. Creative directors can be a designer, design creative director, where they do a lot of the design. The creative director can handle the brand component, which is basically how the image of the brand is. A creative director can also be on the business side of things, where the chief creative officer overlooks marketing as well as the branding. Sometimes they do not intersect, and sometimes they do. I think that really depends on the experience the creative director has, right? I think when Hedi Slimane took over Saint Laurent, he was quite clear on what he wanted his touch points to be. And you can see that very clearly in how the image of the house, the brand image, the design completely transformed. As a child, I was always influenced by photography and by film. When I was probably about 6 years old, we all went to bookstores a lot. I asked my dad to buy me Vogue magazine at that young age. Somehow it was something I was drawn to. So to be absolutely clear, film was actually a second thought. Somewhere around the age of 8 or 9, I wanted to be
in Vogue.
At a I wanted to be working at a magazine. I wanted to write, I wanted to tell stories, I wanted to assign stories and work with incredible writers who have incredible point of view so I can learn from them. I wanted to work with photographers who took these incredible pictures. I wanted to delve into the life of these stylists who styled these incredible pictures. At the end of the day, it's the imagery that really captured what I would relate to as culture at that young age. Because the image changes. There are so many ways of telling a story, and the image just is so rich and vibrant. It can take you to different worlds.
What did you get out of going to school for film? Was it being able to tell your stories, or was it the writing portion of was it visual or more like printed?
The whole process. I think once again, when it came to magazines, I wanted to be there behind the magazine, right? Running in some way, running the show, working at a magazine, because rather than just reading it, because I feel like there you connect with culture. With film, it's the same way. When you go into making a film, you are absolutely doing a deep dive into its own bubble, its own culture, its own story, in production as well as the actual film. At W Magazine, I was fashion director of the men's portfolio. That's how I started. And I'll give you a very brief trajectory, if you will, from graduating at NYU in film and in journalism. I wanted immediately after graduation to act, and the acting is my, I think acting satisfies ego. It also satisfies a psychological pursuit that I have. I always wanted to write and direct. In that first year of acting, it's basically banging down doors, doing auditions, and after audition, and getting rejected. and actors go through that quite a lot. I also had the advantage of being a writer, so I actually did freelance writing for a couple of magazines, magazines in Italy, magazines in Asia, and that paid the bills. But it was kind of a very, very long stretch of like not having a sustainable life, basically. So I had to get a job. Luckily, when I was growing up, I grew up between Singapore, London, and came to New York. Somewhere in London, I had mentioned earlier, I worked at Joseph Paul Maison on Sloane Street. That was also the start of getting deeper into fashion, because Joseph was such a visionary. Eventually, I went to work at Charivari as a PR director. The short story was also 3 months into my job as a PR director, Charivari was imploding in terms of their business. They had expanded too quickly. I needed a job. A good friend of mine at Women's Wear Daily suggested that I take the job at DNR, the Daily News Record, which was the menswear Women's Wear Daily. And so I became an editor at DNR. 9 months into that, the fashion director, Robert Bryan of W Magazine's men's portfolio, went on to New York Times, the fashion supplement. Patrick McCarthy, who basically was the editorial director, gave me that job as men's fashion director.
So with this position as an editor, what was your job? Like, what did you specifically do within being the fashion director?
One, I had to cover every single brand that was out there, which there weren't as many as there are now. Create relationships with them. We also reviewed the fashion shows. We covered all the fashions. But the most important thing was to do the fashion shoots. Basically, come up with the best photographers, come up with the story, the concept, and go out and do the shoot and come back with the best images ever. It was a period where W was just changing from its broadsheet format to being a full-fledged magazine. So it was a time where Dennis Friedman was a creative director, who's now at Barney's, who actually just left Barney's, was culminating relationships with the best photographers in the world. People were not quite sure. W at the beginning was not W today. It was Dennis who brought Bruce Weber, who brought all, the best photographers to work with. Luckily at that time too, for me as a young stylist / fashion director, we were all growing together. We were all, figuring out who was going to be the best photographers. Relationships were very, very important.
Yeah, very, very important.
From an experience point of view, my film experience had given me an in into wanting to create images. And that's where I come in terms of concepting a story. I think I always wanted, my fashion shoots usually have a rich narrative to it. So I like to use fashion as, one of the tools in telling a great story.
So what moment did you realize that you had established your own voice?
I would say, and this is not from an egotistical point of view, I think the voice and the point of view has always been there. I was searching for the right medium. So when I left there, naturally I would have gone to another publication, but somewhat it's just having worked on a freelance level with companies like Brooks Brothers, with doing creative direction and branding, I kind of wanted to delve into that. Because I think there was also being more interested in the business of fashion, and also bringing the experience of a full creative background. So I went and started doing creative direction. Relationships I've already had with a lot of fashion brands from being an editor knew that I was around. So through connections, through people I've already known, I've been referred to different brands. So when I became a creative director, oh gosh, it's pounding the pavement, basically.
Yeah.
You know, calling, talking, meeting people, really trying to convince them that I can really create the image for them.
And tell the story, and tell your story.
You have to know what to do. That voice that you were talking about and that point of view, that is a constant. That's what I've always had. Remember, I'm searching for the medium, searching for the right client. Second to having that point of view is relationships, because that allows me to be able to talk to them from a more direct point of view. When I say relationship, it doesn't mean, I mean, it actually does mean having to know more people and having to know the brands and the people involved in them. You know, because when I say brand, I'm talking a lot about a fashion label. They're very important to the owners and the designers who started it, you know? They all have a certain point of view. When you walk in as a creative director and tell them that you are the one to tell the brand story, how do you connect with them? You do have to have a certain instinct, have a certain affinity to it. The big picture is to tell the story. The big picture is to harness new media, digital, film, it goes right back to the past, to tell the Georg Jensen story. When I got the call from the CEO, from David Chu, offering me the job, it was the most natural thing for people who knew me, people who knew I had such a deep love for design, and also understanding of what it was. I knew what Georg Jensen was. I was also very aware of the different product categories. So when I went into the meeting with the Jensen team, you know, the big question was, we are a jewelry house. We are a home and interior house. We are a house that produces all this incredible silver from the past. They also have watches. They have men's accessories. They were having a little bit of a focus issue. And they're like, how do we tell this brand story? And funnily enough, to me, it was the most natural answer. You are a design house, was what I told them. To me, there was no doubt about the fact that despite the thing that cuts across all the categories it's a design house. It's always worked in collaborative design since the day it was started. Georg Jensen himself had a lot of designer friends design objects for him. So I think that kind of sealed the job, if you will, for me, because of that clear understanding. And what story I wanted to tell was Georg Jensen is the house of design. The story that you're telling, the message that you are creating reaches the audience.
So more so the story on the creative so you would probably say on the creative director end is that whatever you're creating on the creative side, that it also connects with the business side. Would you say that?
When it connects with the audience, which for a brand, it's pretty much a consumer, that would be a success on the business side, because you are convincing people of the image or the brand or the history of the story, of the brand. Ultimately, that translates to brand loyalty.
What's the education look like for a creative director?
Learn everything, be curious, really rely on the timeliness of what you do. I think a brand can be a heritage brand, but a brand also needs to be vital. It also needs to be relevant and current. So when I said you need to be curious and learn everything, I do mean like you need to be caught up on current affairs, you need to be caught up on technology, you need to be caught up on scientific achievements, because ultimately it's what people are affected by. To be able to convey a message, you need to know what people are interested in. I think it's just constantly learning about things, and that will ultimately inform what you do on a creative level.